to begin with, I'm inviting on stage Dr. Sudhir Mehta, founder and chairman, EKA Mobility, and chairman and managing director, Pinnacle Industries. Let's put our hands together for Dr. Sudhir. Next, I'm inviting on stage Ms. Reema Jogani, Director, Reema Transport Private Limited. A big round of applause for Ms. Reema Jogani. Also, I'm inviting Mr. R. Shankar, Executive Director, Special Projects, CVF Supply Chain Solutions. A big round of applause for Mr. R. Shankar. Also, I'm inviting Mr. Siddharth Kirtane, Head of Marketing and HQ Operations, DICV. A big round of applause for Mr. Siddharth. Also, I would request Mr. Kaushik Narayan, CEO, Leap Trucks, to join us on stage. A big round of applause for Mr. Kaushik. To moderate the session and for the keynote session, I would be inviting on stage Mr. Jinal Shah, founder and CEO, Expendus Consulting. Over to you, Jinal sir. We'll start with the panel now.
Hello, check. Welcome back. Thank you all panelists for joining us today. Before we start the panel discussion, I'd like to take a quick poll. How many of you in this room believe this is India's decade? Wow. And rightly so. You know, if you see the mega trends that are gripping the world today, right? I mean, decarbonization, digitalization, demographics, and deglobalization. So these four trends are actually shaping up the world, and look where India stands here today. In terms of demographics, most of these large economies are facing aging population and or declining population. Look at deglobalization. The trend that already started a couple of years ago was actually accelerated in the last 3 years due to COVID. So in lot many terms, India stands to gain from deglobalization, and the world looks for an alternative manufacturing destination. So if you look at the third trend, which is the decarbonization, think of it. Today, India's energy consumption today is one of the lowest in the world. So I take it positively. Look at the switchover cost for us to transition into much greener, cleaner world. I think so it will be much faster. Digitalization, I think so we are already benchmark as a digitalization country. So if you look at most of the economies globally, even the larger ones, may tick mark on one or two of these trends, but lose out on most of it. And India stands to gain on most of these trends. So I believe this is the India growth story, India decade. And as India grows, so will the road sector. And if we step back 5 years of how the industry is shaped up, I think so we saw unprecedented challenges, driven some of them by regulatory policy. We also saw some global supply chain disruptions and health challenges. If those were the disruptions, I think so we should be headed for transformation of this industry. It's going to change in next 10 years as an industry on how we produce, how we manage, and how we sell our products. Coming to the alternate fuel scenario, I think so as an automotive industry, we've already clocked in 1 million vehicles on road. And thankfully, we have crossed the hype cycle today to more of a reality. And India taking the center stage as G20 presidency and our commitment towards the climate change, I think so the trend and the investment flow is very clear as an industry which way it is headed. So not all things are ironed out yet. So today we have expert panelists with us. Let us try and hear from them what it would take as an industry, as stakeholders of this industry, to make this transformation happen, right? So with this, I'd like to open up the panel discussion with Mr. Shankar. Mr. Shankar, thanks for joining us. Logistics industry has been a very critical component of GDP, business, and policy making as well. We have come a long way from being labor intensive to adapting technologies. Everything said and done, I mean, the nature and the fragmented nature of the industry that we are in, what do you see realistically is the type and the scale of technology adoption today in logistics industry? Your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Janal, and it's a pleasure to be here on the forum, maybe after a gap of 2 years. Yes, you rightly said that logistics is one of the barometers of economic growth and development, and logistics plays a role in everything that's there between the source of material till its ultimate point of consumption. We call it supply chain, and logistics is an element of supply chain. Having said that, logistics cost as a percentage of GDP, which was referred to by you as well and other fellow panelists, other speakers in the past, is very high component at about 14%. And in developed markets is around 8%. And the government of India has taken a mandate to bring it down to 10% of GDP. Now, what it entails is how do we bring in better efficiencies? And these efficiencies have to be brought in a manner in which the digitization has to play a significant role. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's take a simple example of how material moves from one location to another location, and when it moves from one location to another location, definitely there is going to be a need for the visibility to be across the supply chain. And it could be a direct mode of transportation from point to point, or it could be an integrated supply chain where it is, a milk run, consolidation, long haul, storage, last mile delivery, be it in the B2B sector or in the B2C sector. If the ultimate cost reduction is one of the aims, then there has to be end-to-end visibility, and this end-to-end visibility has to be provided by technology. Today, it's pretty fragmented, and there is not much of a handshake between one end to another end. So if we got to have a sufficient, efficient supply chain across the source of where the raw material is till the ultimate consumption point, if visibility is there, then inventory comes down, and that itself is one big, huge component of how the cost will go down. The second one is how is asset going to be better utilized? Now, if asset utilization has to happen, then the asset has to be fully sweated, and the asset has to be properly routed, properly filled, and the right kind of asset should be used for the right transportation. And there has to be a handshake between one partner to another partner. Now, if all these are going to happen in real time, and if there was a real-time integration from the consumption point till the source of supply, and if there was real-time linkages between all these points, then obviously there is going to be definitely far more reduction in the overall cost of movement or cost of ownership, as we would call it. For this, what needs to be done is, number one, there has to be a proper and efficient design of the supply chain. Number two, it has to be preferably outsourced, because once outsourcing happens, which is pretty low in a country like India, around 10% is what is outsourced, the higher utilization of the available capacity and asset utilization happens. And third, digitization and seamless transfer of information and material happens from one end to another. So I see many points in which where this disruption can happen. Of course, all this is one part of the story. There has to be an infrastructure improvement, and there has to be many more methods by which the transmission of goods and movement of material happens without any stoppages and wastages. But digitization, in my mind, plays a significant role in this.
Brilliant, Mr. Shankar. Thanks for this. I have a couple of follow-up questions, but I'll come back to you later.
Sure.
I know, Rima, you run a fleet. And, if you'd like to take a follow-up question based on Mr. Shankar's insight, that asset utilization and on-ground, digital connectivity, the ETA culture that we are used to now, thanks to the e-commerce, everyone wants to know where your transit is currently. So what is the on-ground reality? How many of your trucks are really connected? How have you seen technology enabling your fleet efficiencies? Your thought, please.
So I'm going to break this. Thanks, Janal. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to break this question into two. I'm going to first talk of technology, how important technology has been over a period of time, and how it's completely transformed the industry. And then I'm going to talk of infrastructure on ground difficulties. So, technology is completely evolved, as Mr. Shankar said, and it takes me back to the time when it takes me back to the time when I joined the industry, and at that point of time, it's almost 11 years, and that time only GPS was available. Today, you have so much of tracking. You have temperature sensors, you have driver pattern behavior, you have overspeeding sensors, there's fuel monitoring. There's much more possibility for a transporter like us to analyze everything. It's, now AI, data analytics, robotics have come in because of technology. Companies like us, middle size or large size, are implementing ERP for processes and their systems for betterment and more transparency. So technology has only got transparency, accountability, and reliability. Apart from that, government is doing a lot, right? They are promoting technology and digitalization in a very heavy manner. They have implemented, I'm sure through COVID times we see, they've implemented GST, they've implemented e-labels, fast tags. The most brilliant thing which they had done was UPI, seamless payments. And I was just reading an article 2 days back, and Japan is planned, because of the success story of UPI, Japan is planning to, implement UPI payments for cross payments. And because of technology, now we all are sitting here talking of EV trucks. So all this is possible only because of technology. So my only glitch is companies like us, a medium and a large, would invest in technology. Small businesses is a big question mark because they, one, have to get educated, also get the right kind of people, skilled people to be in the system to operate the technology. Of course, people are getting tech savvy, but that is a glitch which I feel. And coming back to your next question, which was on infrastructure, we've seen a transition. Government is spending a lot of money through, they've introduced Gati Shakti, and there are big highways, they're looking at big highways, there are expressways, there are, freight corridors which are created. They're spending a lot of money, they're looking at multimodal logistic parks. All this will need tracking technology. There are also glitches. When they're doing this, when they're making metros, there is roads are in a bad shape. Connectivity is a problem. There are diversions. When diversions happen, people like us have to spend more fuel. Okay, there are more carbon prints. So there are challenges. Delivery is delayed, So there are a lot of glitches when it comes to infrastructure. Government has also introduced that the drivers have to rest for 8 hours. Are we ready with that? 8 hours resting. Today we see truck drivers sleeping in the vehicle. We should be creating hubs for them where there are subsidized food, resting period, where they can, there are small garages. That all infrastructure is still not in place.
Sorry, as an industry or?
As an industry.
Okay.
As an industry, I think government needs to invest there. Also, when they're looking at building bigger highways. Road conditions during rains are really bad. Again, delays. Even for passengers, it's a long halt. So, yeah, that is one. Then, technically, we're looking at EV trucks, right? Do we have enough charging points? Also, how many hours the charging point will take? I think, I was talking to someone, one of the OEMs, and I was looking at it from the local delivery point of view. And it carries only 500. The one whom I was talking to who carries very small parcels. My requirement is much more. I'm sure going forward, we are looking at EV trucks where there'll be higher capacity to carry, the tonnage will increase. But for carrying that much, I have to charge my vehicle for 8 hours. So I will be able to, overnight I charge and then next day I will use that vehicle. So are we ready with infrastructure?
So you're not ready for the downtime, and I think so a
Yes.
lot of them have been addressed here with quick charging and so on and so forth. So at this point, Rima, thanks for your thoughts. I completely understand there are some infrastructure challenges that need to be ironed out. You spoke about technology. At this point, Siddharth, you come from a background where DICV always came with the technology as a forte, right? I mean, were you too early in that era to bring in all that technology? Most of these technologies that we see today are regulatory driven. You didn't wait for regulations to happen. So how has been your experience specifically in the last couple of years, specifically as we move to next gen technologies? Are you getting level playing field, and are technologies, safeties and efficiencies really becoming an important purchase criteria at all? Your thoughts?
All right. Good morning, first of all, to all the dignitaries here on the stage, as well as sitting in the audience. I think, from Daimler's journey point of view, we are fundamentally very clear that any country that goes through this development cycle will eventually reach there. Somebody might take shorter time, somebody might take longer time, depending upon its own, nuances. But I think this is the roadmap. So we were very clear that we will focus on being ahead of the curve when it comes to technology and safety. And now, of course, I saw even in today's meeting, people talking about drivers. I've been seeing a lot of LinkedIn posts from several customers and industry stalwarts focusing on drivers. But I think this is something that has got neglected, unfortunately, for a long time. We must understand that as the economy will grow, transport will grow. And at the end of the day, drivers are the unsung heroes, unfortunately, but they are the backbone of transport industry. So we chose from day one that we will design our trucks keeping the driver in mind. Good trucks attract good drivers. That's the fundamental thought process. So you try and make good trucks, eventually it will attract good drivers. It may take 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, that's a matter of time. But eventually, I think the industry will move there. We are I would say we are really very happy to see the kind of acceleration that is happening in these areas. So while, of course, we went through our own learning and investment curve to reach where we are today, but I think the acceleration is extremely positive, and I think it's good for the society, it's good for the industry. Just to give you one data point, we noticed that every decade, the highest horsepower of the truck in the beginning of the decade actually became the lowest horsepower of the truck in the next decade.
Interesting.
So if you go back one decade, I think the highest horsepower of the truck used to be 210 horsepower and odd. And in this decade, the 210 horsepower is the lowest, and 300 horsepower is the highest. And we are very confident that within this decade, before the end of this decade, we will see 300 horsepower to be the lowest in the industry, and possibly we will move to 400 horsepower and above. And that's the journey that all the developing markets have gone through, and I'm sure India will also go through the same. So some learning over the last 10 years, but very excited with what's happening now. And it's good for the society, good for the industry, and good for all of us.
Thanks. A follow-up question. Quickly, you said you're looking at horsepower increasing as we progress, and globally we have seen a scenario when there is an emission change or tighter emission norms. Generally, engine downsizing happens. So not at the cost of horsepower, but do you see electrification, addressing that horsepower at the same time? Because we are seeing electric tippers entering in this mining segment of late.
See, right now, I would say that, we are actually in the beginning of the journey of this transformation. And quite a lot of it is very hazy, so to say. Okay. So while everybody feels what will happen, I think, it's not really clear which way, the industry will move, what will really create value for the customers and the industry, so to say. The road to zero emissions will go through several phases. So I wouldn't say that, maybe electric is the end game. But I think by the time we reach there, we will see a lot of transformations, a lot of fuels coming in. we clearly see that India will have multi-fuel trucks operating at the same time. And I think depending upon the infrastructure, the availability of the fuels, segments will pick up. Coming specific to electric tippers, that one category, definitely qualifies well for the electric technology, because tippers generally operate, apart from mines and some construction sites, they do operate in the cities. They contribute to urban infrastructure. For example, RMC trucks, they largely operate within the cities. So we do see that there is a good potential for this segment to shift to that platform, but quite a lot of it will depend upon, as ma'am was mentioning, will depend upon the infrastructure, the overall, cost, commercial viability, and, how the technologies mature, and so on and so forth. So maybe down the line, when the fuel scenario will mature, maybe tippers could be one segment, but right now it is a little too early in the game. We still see diesel to be, and I also saw your slide, what you're showing, that at least for next decade, we still see diesel to be the leading fuel, and rest of the other all alternate fuels to be still lesser than what the diesel will be, particularly for heavy-duty trucks.
Thanks. I think so Dr. Mehta is the right person to really address and bring in some clarity in the haziness that we see in the electric vehicle. Maybe you could throw some light. Are we really too early in this space? I see there is a traction in small commercial vehicles in terms of volumes, but e-bus has not really geared up to the level it should have, despite FAME2 and CESL. So what has been your e-bus experience, right from capacity to managing FAME2 demand and also sourcing? Because I know there's a lot of challenge evolving around that. So if you can complement Siddharth's thought on whether it's too early.
Sure. So first of all, great to see everybody in our city of Pune. Want to compliment the organizers for organizing this in our city, which is really going to be playing a very important role in this change. So let me start by the first point that you spoke today. Is this really India's decade? Because I think all of this comes back from that. I said this at the conference last year, and I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it because you can remind me that by the year 2030, India will be the largest EV market in the world outside of China. So I think that in some ways is the starting point for this discussion. I firmly believe that, and I think we are on the road to that. Let's start with a couple of data points again on why India, why the CV industry, and then why EVs or any of these others. So I think some very significant things are happening. Number one, I don't know if you saw recently that this is the first time ever that on a PPP parity basis, the BRICS countries are actually ahead of the G7 in growth. This is extremely, extremely important that compared to the G7, which has really been the driving force for the world, the BRICS countries are now growing faster on a total basis. Number two, by any reckoning over the next 10 years, 50% of the growth of the world will come from India and China. So if you take any of these three statistics, it's very clear that this is where the growth is going to happen. You spoke about the million vehicles by and large, what India will produce. I think this will happen, and possibly there is a room to do a lot more. And the reason for that is that now coming to electric vehicles, as of today, China is about 96 to 97% of volumes on electric vehicles the world over. For all the talk of Europe and the US on alternative fuels, sustainability, the bottom line is that in numbers terms, China is by far the giant in the pack. So coming from that, there is certainly going to be a move towards having alternatives to that, number one. And India is the only other major auto market which will grow to the extent needed to be able to take on some of these factors. So this growth is very clear. Number two, the move towards alternative fuels and mobility is very clear in India, because India has always been the country which is between promise and reality. There is always promise that better things will happen, and there is a reality which sometimes comes in the way to say that what we believed will happen or not happen. But in this case, this move is now very clear because India, especially in the commercial vehicle industry, if there is something everybody understands, it's dhanda, which everybody understands the value of return on investment. Every commercial vehicle customer, and I will have met thousands and thousands of them, know their business better than almost every OEM because they know the unit economics, they know the return, they know everything about their business. And what is now changing is the fact that electric vehicles, even without subsidy in many segments, are starting to become viable. First and foremost, no product anywhere in the world can run eventually on subsidy. It has to start with subsidy and has to transition to being working on a standalone basis. Many segments of the market are already starting to be where this change is happening. Take the change of three-wheelers, goods, what's happened in the industry. CNG used to be nowhere 6 years ago. Then suddenly CNG became, in 1 year, 40%. Now you're starting to see the transition towards electric vehicles. It's not happening because the OEMs are very smart or something else. It's happening because the customer is smart and the customer realizes that these vehicles now are a great return on investment. So the customer is buying these vehicles. Similar changes will start to happen. And again, this is not something I'm telling you that you don't know already, but the fact is, an alternative fuel vehicle works if you run it all the time. An electric vehicle, by definition, the cost of running an electric vehicle is between 10 to 20% of a conventional vehicle. So the capital cost is higher. So you do the math, it's very simple. The more you run an electric vehicle, the more you will save. If you don't run it, it's the worst use case. So actually, cars from a, let's say, emission perspective, from a return on investment perspective, unless they are being used as taxis, are the worst use case as far as electric vehicles are concerned because they are in the garage 95% of the time. A car is normally run 60, 80, 100 kilometers. That's not the best use case for an electric car. Of course, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy it because you want to buy it, but it's not an economic use case. The best use cases for electric vehicles are what's happening in the two-wheeler segment. You are already starting to see it, where segments like the courier segment, where the vehicle is used all the time, are shifting to electric. You are starting to see it in small commercial vehicles. Today, it's more availability of product rather than demand. When the right products are coming along, they're starting to see use cases. You will start to see this in niches like garbage vehicles. You will start to see it in city vehicles. Cities are going to start mandating that they move to electric, so definitely there will be a move to electric. Now, on your question on buses, this is again one area where I think we've done a horrible job. India, for all its talk, I'll give you the example of our city of Pune. We've spent 22,000 crores in building a metro. But the metro is destined to fail in Pune. If you see a few years ago or a few days ago, they came out with ads saying, celebrate your birthday on the metro. Now, metro wasn't made to celebrate your birthday. The metro was made to travel from point A to point B. And in India, metros are not going to work unless you add last mile connectivity. There are no places to park when you first go to take the vehicle, and there are no places, our footpaths don't exist. So to expect people to walk that 2 kilometers on a non-existing footpath is not going to happen. The only way this will happen is if we have last mile connectivity coming from smaller feeder buses. Just to give you a perspective, in India, we have 1.2 buses per 1,000 people. A country like South Africa has 6.5. A country like Thailand has 8. So India doesn't need 100,000 buses. India needs a few million buses. But this is the demand side. So demand is never an issue. Buses are needed in India. Public transport is needed. Why is it not happening? One very simple reason. For whatever reason, it was decided that buses will sell on what are called GCC contracts. GCC contracts means that the vehicle has to be run by the OEM, the vehicle has to be managed by the OEM and maintained by the OEM for a period of 12 years. Nowhere else in the world or even in India for any product, the manufacturer is asked to fund and run their product. It's not that the big OEMs of the country in conventional vehicles don't have balance sheet money, but financing is a different business. It has to be carried out by financial institutions. So unless this is separated, OEM's job is to make vehicles, is to service vehicles. The job of financial institutions is to finance vehicles. The job of operators is to run the vehicle. And the job of an STU is to make sure that there's enough passengers. And till we fundamentally realize this, and I think this realization is now coming, you will start to see a flood of orders. India will not have the capacity to produce buses because there is no alternative to making 100,000 buses in India. We have more than 500,000 buses which are more than 15 years old. Because of COVID, they could not transition. Most of the operators, as you know, went into financial difficulty. All those buses need to be replaced, and they can only be replaced if there is a funding mechanism to do that.
So if I understood rightly, Dr. Mehta, you are saying that GCC model is not viable.
Not viable in the current context. So two things have happened. One, and I blame the industry for this, in their eagerness, and to be a little blunt, in their eagerness for valuations, in their eagerness to show that they have numbers, industry quoted prices which are not viable. It's not rocket science. You can do the mathematics. At 35, 40 rupees a kilometer, the unit economics do not work. At 60 rupees a kilometer, they work, which is still less than the cost of running a diesel bus. So first, prices have to come to reasonable levels. Nobody can continue to give buses for marketing costs. You can only do it for so much time, which is why you're seeing that today, orders for electric buses, 15,000 orders are released. What was the reality of delivery? 100 buses last month. Somewhere this has to change. Number two, there has to be green funding coming into this business.
Okay.
You cannot have funding which is done by the OEM. No OEM has the ability to fund 100,000 crores of buses coming in. It just doesn't work for any product. Give me example of one product in the country where this is done. It does not happen.
So despite the CSL orders or FAME 2, I think so we have a long way to go in terms of e-bus penetration. And do you see possibility of revisiting the entire GCC model coming up? And with that logic, I think so the penetrations, your crystal gaze, where do you see electric buses 27?
It's a national imperative. See our cities. We have our cities to travel anywhere. I have stopped going to Bangalore because going to Bangalore, it's easier than to meet somebody in Europe than to go to Bangalore from here and do a 3-hour travel. You go to Chennai, you see our city of Pune. We are struggling because private vehicles are never the only solution for a city like ours. People are willing to take. When we go to London, we take the metro. Why? Because there is seamless connectivity. On the same side, in our city of Pune, again, I'm taking the example of Hinjewadi, which is a major industrial hub here. You see, people are taking 2 to 3 hours to reach there. The only solution is public transport, which is good, which is clean, which is air-conditioned, and which is reasonable cost. Everybody will want to use it, if it works well.
Hopefully we get there. I have a couple of follow-up questions for you, but let me bring in Kaushik here. Kaushik, we have seen a good run of the commercial vehicle industry, and the fleet replacement cycles play a very important role in that incremental demand that is generated year on year. So with the new gen trucks coming in BS6, the price is going up. We saw something, a trend in car segment that the used car demand went up really high due to BS6. Is that something that you witnessed a similar story? Do you see the cost of used truck going up due to the price differential going up with BS6?
So I think it's a great question, Janal. So thank you. So I just want to ask the panel, how many of you guys have actually sold or bought a used car in the last 5 years through an online, portal? Raise your hands, please. Anybody? I see a few hands here and there, but typically what we see is, especially in the car segment, I think the car industry last year has actually grown by about 24%. And the growth actually exceeded their all-time high from the financial year 18-19. The commercial vehicle has not reached that height as yet. We are still about 7% below our all-time high, which we reached again in 18-19. And one of the big challenges in scaling up the commercial vehicle numbers has been ease around, selling of used commercial vehicles through a seamless manner. Now, there have been a few challenges over the last few years, which I think we are in a watershed moment where that transition will accelerate over the next few years. The first thing is, if you are in the market to sell a used truck, it's very difficult for you to figure out who wants to buy them. Or if you're a buyer, you don't really know who wants to sell them or who is the right person for you to go to get that truck. This solution, this is actually coming through used marketplaces that are growing very rapidly, primarily driven by, the COVID era where we were forced to go digital for multiple reasons. The second challenge has also been around the evaluation process and the estimation of pricing for used commercial vehicles. So in terms of evaluation, there was no standardized methodology. The estimation of pricing was really vague. However, through the OEMs actually coming out with pre-owned models like what Bharat-Benz has done or what Eicher has done or Tata has done, along with what the used marketplaces are actually doing to come up with a standard SOP for evaluating the prices, along with estimation engines that are actually coming in place that you can access very easily online, that problem is getting solved. The third major issue has been around the paperwork. If you are a seller of cars, the only thing you really need to worry about is insurance, because pretty much you're paying for the lifetime tax at the time you're purchasing a car. However, when it comes to commercial vehicles, it's a lot more complicated than that. You need to worry about the permits. You need to worry about any issues at the RTO. You need to ensure that the fitness certificates are actually up to snuff and up to date. So making sure all of these are up to date also becomes a huge challenge. But however, the Vahan portal has been a great enabler in terms of giving us a much more easier solution to check all of those even prior to the transaction being completed. Another challenge has also been around trusting the buyer and the seller, because pretty much when you're actually looking at somebody, how much can you actually trust, because you don't really know the history around who this person really is. This again is being solved by the marketplaces where they're able to tell you if these buyers and sellers have been pre-validated or not. Last but not the least, it is around the regulation itself. I think regulation around used commercial vehicles has been really weak until now, but there are a couple of major changes that are coming in that will really change this industry and drive it to organization. The first one is dealer registration process. A law has come into place where all the used car and commercial vehicle dealers have to register themselves at the local RTOs. All the transactions that are being done by them also have to be registered at the local RTO. So this will ensure that, from a paperwork perspective, things are a lot better, and this helps organization of the industry. The second is, what a lot of the speakers have talked about, the scrapping policy. While the policy is in place, the implementation is still something that is yet to come in and kick off. But we also, expect that over the next 2 to 3 years, there will be a drive to actually formalize the scrapping policy. This will also help address the acceleration of this industry. In terms of your specific question around the pricing of used commercial vehicles, we have actually seen that the pricing of used commercial vehicles has grown significantly post BS6 vehicle implementation. So, if you wanted an estimate, for example, we've seen that, for example, school buses, the pricing of the vehicles today for a 3 or 4 year old buses is the same as what it was when they bought it 3 to 4 years back. So the prices of new vehicles have gone up to such an extent with all the regulation that it becomes a lot more attractive for you to look at a used, school bus or a truck. The same thing has happened in terms of commercial vehicles also. And the more the organization of this segment happens, I think the price realization when it comes to sellers and large fleet operators like REMA, they'll actually see a huge benefit in terms of improving the realization of the used commercial vehicles.
So what we saw is probably we are still at a very nascent stage in terms of an organized online platform market, but it does add value from the customer's perspective to identify the right vehicle from the right location, and also bring in a lot more transparency which was not available. You speak about transparency, most of these vehicles were never serviced in the OEM service station. So isn't that a big challenge to really figure out the service history or the reliability of the vehicle? How are you trying to address that? Do you have a third party check and revalidate everything?
So I think this is a huge problem, and it's also a huge opportunity, because I think when it comes to BS3 vehicles and older, those vehicles were pretty much mechanical for the most part. There wasn't much electronics associated with them. So most of these vehicles were being serviced outside the service centers post the warranty period. But what we are seeing from BS4 onwards, and especially with BS6 vehicles, is that these vehicles actually come to the service center for servicing, very similar to what you're actually seeing in the car industry. Now, the problem is that this history is actually available at a very local location, but the opportunity is that this is a great opportunity for the OEMs like Siddharth to actually monetize this, because if they are able to package these vehicle histories and make it available to a third party to access it as an add-on feature, like what you have with Carfax in the US, I think this makes a very value-added opportunity for the OEMs. This is of great value to aggregators and platforms like ourselves, and for the buyers of commercial vehicles also, because you're able to get a very, very good history of these commercial vehicles at the time of purchase.
Sure. Thanks, Kaushik. Very interesting thoughts. One area that we believe is lagging behind in the entire Indian commercial vehicle growth is the truck bodybuilding. When will we see beautiful trucks? My son asked. So,
You're asking the right question to the wrong guy. Okay, so I think that's one area that definitely where, in my view, Bharat-Benz has taken a huge lead in terms of the quality of the truck, in terms of including the beauty of the truck, the comfort and the safety. For example, we are talking about safety. I was just mentioning about drivers. We are now offering our cabins which are meeting safety regulations which are not even mandated in India as of now. Okay, so we are ahead even in that. I mean, crash-tested cabins meeting regulations which are not even mandated in India as of now. From this year onwards, we have introduced that on our cabs. Coming to the truck bodybuilding, I definitely feel because the way the industry has suddenly expanded, so we are doing well, and then of course we hit COVID, and then we had a sharp recovery that has happened. I think the capacities became an issue a little bit in terms of availability of fully built units. So while we clearly see that there is a preference towards the fully built units, I think it's more of the capacity issue which is right now creating this situation. So I'm very sure that there will be specific applications. For example, tippers are now totally preferred to be fully built. Similarly, specific applications like reefer containers are preferred to be fully built. I think tip trailers is another application. But I think there are many applications where I think, the customers have their preferences from where and how, which specifications they want to build. So maybe it's a little bit of time, but I think we are moving in that direction.
You made an interesting point on capacity shortages. So while, the truck bodybuilding industry has thrived on, because we're primarily a coal market for years, and the core value addition was customizations, like you rightly said, customizations, reduce costs, and, maximizing payload, if I may say, was where the industry got a really breather. But with this new gen trucks coming in, and companies like you who have been proactive on safety and offering fully built vehicles, if I understand rightly, right from day one, right? Isn't this an opportunity that is still to be tapped, or do you see that to be outsourced to more organized truck builders rather than built in-house capacities? So, your thoughts?
So 2 points from the question that you made. One is definitely you touched a very sensitive point, So from day one, for example, you still talked about these cowls. So it's a little bit of a dichotomy that we talk great lengths about safety, and in the morning we talk about ADAS and so many other features, but yet we continue to allow cowl trucks being sold.
Exactly.
I think that is something which is, just imagine OBD2 vehicles with ADAS and airbags and stuff like that, and it's a cowl truck. So I think this is something that we really need to stand up to. If we firmly believe that safety is an important area and human life is important, Bharat-Benz in that area from day one, despite, in fact, in 2012 when the products were introduced, 80% of the market was cowl.
Absolutely.
And we stuck to our belief, we stuck to our core philosophy that we value drivers. Those are the unsung heroes, and we will not compromise on safety and technology. And we stuck to that principle. And now we see that still 20-25% of the market is cowl, but balance 75% fortunately has moved towards factory built cabs. But this 25% also should go away. That's number one. Number two, coming to the other point that you asked in terms of whether it's a good business case for manufacturers to kind of do fully built, I think we have to understand that this next decade is more about moving from individual excellence to collective success.
True.
So it is more to do with collaboration and partnerships. I definitely see that good quality bodybuilders will thrive, and there will be partnerships between OEMs and them. But I'm not very sure that what all applications can be taken over by OEMs as an additional revenue, and what should go on the bodybuilding side. But there will be more collaborations for sure. That is the trend that I see.
Perfect, thanks. And it's an encouraging trend that we are seeing. I thought it was around about 45-50% of fully built. If you are seeing at 70%, it's a great ratio change. And for once, probably we'll feel safer standing or driving next to the trucks and not get worried being hit around. Siddharth, you mentioned drivers are hero. Rima, could you really think,
This question is very, very close to me. If you're going to
yeah,
talk
I mean,
of
I
drivers.
thought of you as he mentioned drivers are hero, but think about it, the declining driver availability, and a lot of us mentioned the status of the way drivers are treated. What are you doing to address that issue, not only as a company, but as an industry? I keep hearing, drivers are hero, and we need to do a lot, they need to be given, but who's going to do it?
I'm going to take some time to answer this, okay? So you'll have
All
to give me
yours.
some time. So, of course, it's a bleeding issue for all transporters, and if there are any transporters, they will agree with me that this is a bleeding issue. But by God's grace, for my company, our company, we have 75% of retention level.
Excellent.
And there is a reason why it is at 75%. Going forward, when we grow, I think this issue will also become an issue for us. Well, what are we doing right to retain them, right? Lot of things. We give them a lot of training for safety. As he mentioned, safety plays a very, very important role. I want to just give you an example. Recently, in Trans Topic, Mr. Girish Michandani has covered our story on a driver. We don't train them only safety for them, but also on humanity grounds, help others when they are in need. So recently, one of my driver, was driving Nasik Highway. He saw a car which was burning. And by mandatory, we have a fire extinguisher in our vehicle. He stopped the vehicle at a safe place. He went there. He helped the women to get out. With our fire extinguisher, he tried to subsidize the fire. He realized वो नहीं हो रहा था, so he stopped a CST bus. He took a fire extinguisher for them. So I think drivers also are humans, and they should be treated like that. They should be given a lot of respect, and they should be recognized, right? So this was because the safety plays a very important role, and we keep training them. Our OEMs, our vendors, all of them come together and help. We have insured them. We do health checkups for them regularly. When their family is in crisis, we go out, reaching out to them at all given point of time. Not only that, we also celebrate Driver's Day. Driver's Day is celebrated naturally on 17th September. We don't celebrate a day, we celebrate a week. The reason being, all drivers cannot be there at the same point, right? It's a good time to kind of interact with our drivers, ask them informally, because during the working days, they don't really have the time to talk. Kyunki load pe jana hai, right? So I think the week gives them a time whenever the drivers are coming. Whenever the drivers are coming, we kind of talk to them informally, ask them what are the issues they're facing. Their comfort is very important. We also give them training on how they should be planning their financial needs, how their decorum should be, how they should present themselves. And I'm telling you, drivers have really evolved, right? But it's sad that people don't recognize that. Another thing which we have actually implemented, there's this concept called Chalak Se Malak, where drivers become owners. We give them a loan interest free, where they pick up an old vehicle which is 6 years old, they become a malak. And when they become a malak, that vehicle is attached with us. So that gives them a sense of motivation, and they're becoming owners, which they would have not bought a vehicle, right? So these are few things which we do. Apart from that, we celebrate their birthdays. If they are there in the branch, wherever, we call for a cake, we celebrate their birthday. We make them feel special. It's very, very important. During COVID times, there are a lot of challenges as transporters, and this is a burning issue, right? Drivers are doctors of this industry. Were they treated like that? I'm sorry, they were not. We had to take permissions. Dhabas were shut. So overnight we had to set up, we had to request our vendors, we had to request our OEMs, we had to request our customers, please ensure unko khana mil jaye, sanitization mil jaye, resting period mil jaye. They were there when we were sitting at home and getting food. They were there all the time for giving us medicines. They were the ones who, we got COVID injections because of them. But were they giving that respect? No. So we do our bit. Is the industry doing that bit? It's a big question mark. I think,
I think so at this point, we do need a round of applause for all that efforts. This thing, and it's a welcome change that we are seeing. A lot many conferences, only challenges are spoken. I'm very happy that you are actually implementing a couple of things. Safety is always, lot more spoken about, less delivered. And I'm sorry, but on interest of time, I'll have to have a quick crystal gazing round before we open the floor for questions. Mr. Shankar, while we talk about numbers, getting it down from 14 to 8%, when do you see realistically that happening, that transformation? A quick one.
That's a billion-dollar question because we've been talking about it for quite some time, including the government. But at least a couple of things from the regulatory, from the government intervention standpoint. The national logistics policy is out, therefore it's a stated intention of the government. The second thing that I see is that the Gati Shakti program is taking care of a lot of infrastructural issues, debottlenecking everything. Everything has come on a single platform, and therefore that's a second big initiative that has taken place. The third thing that I'm seeing for this to happen is a lot more outsourcing to happen. Automotive industry at a very high level of outsourcing, but across all industries, if one were to look at the extent of outsourcing is about 10%. Developed markets is upward of 35 to 50%. In fact, in Europe and US, it's as high as 75%. So once that happens and the adoption of digital standards, I expect this significantly, and of course it's a government target, but industry is also supporting it, by 2027 to come to at least a double digit of 10.
Excellent.
And then moving forward, maybe coming down further.
That's a very encouraging news, and you mentioned very important aspect of moving from core activities and outsourcing the non-core activities. A lot of them are actually having in-house logistics with the perspective that you save costs, but a lot of inefficiencies coupled with that. So thanks, Mr. Shankar. Dr. Mehta, you have pain with respect to the viability of the GCC model. Having said that, your quick guess on where we stand in terms of localization of critical components, and where do you see the inflection points happening for the buses?
So I think despite what I said on GCC, I want to make it clear that there is going to be no more market which is more exciting than the Indian market. Sure. I think this is the market to be. This is the market which will be the fastest growing market in all of these areas. On your specific question on localization for electric vehicles, very clear, there are three broad areas.
Right.
Mechanical components, where India scores very highly, not to be worried, many suppliers are ramping up. Electrical and electronics, I would say between 0 to 2 years, we are starting to see in the last year investments come into this play. It takes a year or so before those come in. So I would say probably in a year's time, you will start to see a lot of actual local content. The third is the battery. Battery is 40% of the value of any electric vehicle. Cells are probably at least 2 years away. There are many people who are now with the PLI schemes and others looking at making cells in India. But by the time that they get to any volume, 2 to 3 years. So I would say we are maybe 3 years away from where we start to see serious local content.
Sure.
And in 5 years, personally, I believe that India has an opportunity to really become one of the big export leaders for EVs. Because the realization on EVs outside of India is far better than it is in India. So you will start to see that as OEMs, as component suppliers build up capacity, they will build up capacity not only for India, but for exports. Today, again, China made 133,000 electric buses last year. Why can India not make? We have a similar size market. So the opportunity is phenomenal. I think it's up to us as an industry to come together, create this ecosystem, bring all the key players together, and really look at government only as an enabler. The rest of it, the industry has to do.
Great thoughts. So we will look at inflection points somewhere around 27, 28, realistically speaking. And you mentioned about 2 per 1,000. That speaks about local demand, and you also speak about exports. So think about the capacities that would be need, going forward. Rima, a quick message to your fellow truckers on how we can improvise efficiencies and make also what you have implemented for drivers, if you can enhance. I think so. Your thoughts?
I think it's high time people realize drivers are doctors, warriors, and backbone of this industry. And if you don't, you recognize them. I actually missed out a point when I was talking. We have a lady called Harinder who actually went en route on a trip with her drivers. And it's so sad that drivers were not allowed in a restaurant. Why? Why is there so much discrimination? Why aren't they human beings? I mean, why would they do that? I would love to. I mean, there's so many times if I get a chance, I would sit with my drivers and eat food. How is it different?
So
why
equal stature,
so
right?
I think
Equal stature will play an
exactly,
important
giving
role.
them equality, making
Fine.
them feel they're extremely important. And recognition, rewards. We also incentivize our drivers per trip. I think giving them the motivation and, honestly, as an industry, all of us are recognized. All of us are talking here. We talk everything. But do we really touch drivers? Do we really applaud them? And thank you so much for doing this. But I think it's high time that message comes out to everyone, right?
Thank you. I think it's a very important message. Equal stature and opportunities also, very important point. Siddharth, your take on the growth of heavy-duty market given the infrastructure growth. Do we see similar stories where we see North America with infrastructure growing, a lot of HD trucks coming in?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. In fact, I was going to make a mention that while you were showing that presentation in terms of, heavy-duty curve being a little bit flattish compared to the light-duty trucks that you showed over there, we have to recognize that in 2018, the axle load norms changed, number one. Number two is that if you see what's happening in the last couple of years, the shift is very clearly visible to bigger capacity. So within the rigid, the 14 and the 16 wheelers are growing much strongly. Similarly, you see a huge growth happening in tractor trailers. So if you really plot the actual number of tons that have, in terms of the configuration that has got sold, possibly we have already touched that peak already, the previous peak. You don't get to see it in the truck numbers
because you can numbers.
Exactly. So when you look at the goods being transported, definitely, this is a clear-cut sign that the customers want to move more and more towards do more with less. You transport more with lesser number of trucks. And therefore, you might see the number very differently, but the shift is very clearly to
higher tonnage vehicles.
The higher tonnage. So within the LCV and the MCV segments, you are seeing them to move from 12 tons to 15 tons, 15 tons to 16 tons, 16 to 19.
Sure.
Okay, so I see that India heavy-duty truck growth is extremely robust, and I think that's the space to be in.
Perfect, thank you. Kaushik, your thoughts on organized industry growth in terms of the replacement market and the online industry per se must not be even 1% today. Where do you see that with rise of informed customers going forward?
So I'll just pick on one thing Dr. Mehta was actually talking about. While, the GCC model, why I do understand that it's not scalable, one good thing that's happened is the fact that the government has made the OEMs put their money where their mouth is. And this actually gives a lot of good data to the OEMs to understand how this new technology works, how the operation works.
Yeah, teething challenges here.
Yeah, and it'll ensure that, in the long scale,
Sure.
they'll actually do what's right. In terms of the organized industry, becoming an organized industry on the pre-owned segment, I think it will accelerate very, very quickly over the next few years. And our estimation is that over the next 3 years, we should probably be somewhere around double digit in terms of penetration, percentage points. And hopefully in another 5 years or so, when we have more electric vehicles out in the field and when we have alternate fuels coming out, we'll probably be at a place where we are closer to about 25% by the end of this particular decade.
Wow, that's amazing growth story that you envisage. With this, I think so we're running short of time, but we have time for 3 quick questions, please, if any. Yes.
Great session. My question goes to Rima. Rima, you have driven down your points exceptionally.
Kunal, if
well.
you can just hold the
I
mic a
can't
little
hear you,
closer.
sorry. Can you hear
So
me?
my question is for you. Yes, you have driven your points about the driver very clear and with great efficiency. One of the points that I could not find a conclusion to, and I want to come back to that. My name is Kunal Sharma. I'm a partner at Tiliv International, which is a specialist consulting company in business development and marketing and sourcing and supply chain management. So you mentioned that companies like you, who are a little larger in operations and organized, you are implementing technologies in your trucks and aggregates, and then you compared it to some, unorganized players, and then the point was left out. What did you mean by that? Do you mean that it brings in, it drives incompetitiveness, or do you utilize technology to leverage it?
So I think, like I was saying, technology plays a very important role for, visibility in terms of where your consignment is. And a medium-sized to a large-sized companies adapt to it easily because technology comes with a cost. When I was talking of unorganized sector where smaller players, one, they have to be educated how important technology is for us to adapt, because we are, talking to bigger companies, it becomes easier for us to adapt to what is the need of an hour. But for smaller players, which would have one or two vehicles, for them to get educated and to adapt to it will be difficult. That is what I meant.
Thank you.
If I questioned you right.
Answered me right.
Thanks. Any other questions? Yes, the lady in the second row, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Sulekha Rana and I am from Vision Spring Foundation. So we closely work with drivers community, and especially for commercial drivers. So we take care of their health, we take care of their mental health, and we reach out to them at their areas like parking areas, highways, tolls, dhabas, and we provide them eye screening services and we provide them eyeglasses on the spot. And also we take care of their mental health by psychologists and by doctors. So my question is to all of you, how can we make this mandatory, driver's health for every vehicle manufacturing company or every OEMs, so that they can take care of their health, not only for them or for their families as well. So how can we make this mandatory for everyone?
I think so that many of these organized segment might have a policy in place for taking care of their health. But, in unorganized segment, maybe there's a lot more work to be done. If there's anybody who would like to add?
Hi. So, we already take insurance for our drivers, right?
Right.
And there are regular periodic checkups which they have to go through. So there's this constant education given to them how important their health is. So that is what we internally do as transporters, I hope.
Right.
This is from my side, if anyone wants to add on to something.
It's more of an unorganized sector that needs to get organized. Maybe this issue will be solved. There's one gentleman here
Thank you.
and one here. These are the last two ones we could take, please.
Come to you. No problem.
Morning, everyone. I'm Girish Michandani. Jinal, one quick observation, and then Rima and Siddharth can probably pitch into this about the logistics costs coming down. We're looking at getting it down to 7%, 8%. But one important link we are missing here is a truck today, which is costing 30 lakhs or 40 lakh upwards, is running only 15 days in a month, whereas 15 days it's parked at a warehouse, outside the warehouse, to load, unload, or for whatever reason. Can the government mandate the customers that there should be a fixed loading, unloading time? So Rima can help with that, and probably Siddharth will also help in the truck moving more, doing more number of kilometers a month rather than the 8,000 or 9,000 which we are doing currently.
I think so. It's a given as things improve, the kilometers clocked in improve, and we have seen historically how we have moved from 300 to 500 kilometers per day. I think so. There are some system-driven efficiencies that need to be.
I would like to
Yeah,
differ
I know,
here,
I know
Jital, because
completely.
the average is still at 375 to 400, except for the long
Dr.
haul
Mehta
where
and
you're doing
Mr.
probably
Siddharth, yeah,
800.
if you'd like to add.
Yeah, maybe, I'll let Rima answer first, the first part, but I definitely want to touch on what you said in terms of how the truck utilization can go up. My only simple point is that why is it that, any transformational journey, we want to do it only when there is a policy implementation? See, if we really want to grow and make a transformational change, I think it should come from within. It should come from the society. So I build trucks because my customers want them to be built like that. And they want it to be built like that because their customers are asking something like that. If we only follow this and eventually come back saying that if we are pushed to the wall, only then we will change, then I think our transformation journey will be incremental. It cannot be called transformational. But truck utilizations are going up. For example, at Bharat Benz, our design philosophy is 1 million kilometer. So we design the trucks for 1 million kilometer life. And we have umpteen number of cases where our trucks have, the first truck sold is even running today, which was sold in 2000. There are many, many trucks which have done 1.5 million kilometers and running. So you're right, at the end of the day, the cost will come down also with the utilization of truck going up. Second thing is when we talk of cost as a ratio of GDP, we should also forget that, gone are the times where 1 rupee saved was 1 rupee earned. India now as a country has moved into a phase where there is opportunity to earn more. So you spend more, you earn more. So everything cannot be just, total. Somewhere we have to move from this total cost of ownership to total value of ownership and see, do I have assets and infrastructure which can double my revenue even if my cost is going up by 1.25 times. And then the cost will come down, but I think maybe Rima can answer that better as a customer.
I agree with sir. And so, Girish, as you mentioned, if loading and unloading is done on time, the efficiency will increase. But does that really happen? You know how many challenges as transporters we go through en route? How many times we are stopped by officials? How many times our drivers are stopped en route? For documentation, for example, e-waybill, if there's an off-site, wo update nahi hua. If some part is foresight, the vehicle will be standing there. The unloading will not happen. We will be fined. There are a lot of challenges. Of course, we want to utilize our vehicle at the fullest. I think also another challenge is, getting return loads. I think it's time to synergize with people and work together. Don't compete with people so you can ensure that you utilize a vehicle to the fullest and run miles, right?
Thanks.
So, yeah.
Dr. Mehta, I'll have you the last word for the day. Maybe.
Yeah, so Girish, this is something that's been discussed for 20 years. The solutions are known to everybody. First of all, let's not get the government in. They are already in our lives too much. Let's not get them into this. Solutions are known. It's Euro pallets. The world uses Euro pallets. Why the hell in India we decide कि हम अपना pallet बनाएंगे, which is different? It's so elementary. Number two, decoupling of tractors and trailers. Again, the world uses these solutions. I don't know why we try to invent solutions which have been found 30 years ago and the world is using and we are discussing it 20 years later. I think these are things all of us know kya karna hai. For whatever reason, we don't do them. And I think to expect the government to do something in this would be a disaster. These are simple things which can be done. Euro pallets need to be implemented. You can call them India pallet, you can call them whatever you want. It's simple. Give the transporter the same size pallet, transportation will increase.
That's
but
a great solution.
everybody continues to make different ones. I don't know why.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you panelists for joining us. It was wonderful hearing you out, and thank you audience for being patient listeners. And there's enough opportunity to interact through the day. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much everyone for joining us here and for this